Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding a fantasy-themed football manager simulation. In my last video, I talked about rock, paper, scissors mechanics, meaning mechanics where there's at least three possible choices, each of which is good against some other choices and bad against particular other choices, so that there's hopefully not a single best strategy or a single worst strategy, but rather the player has to work out what the opponents are doing, in this case a computer-controlled opponent, and predict that and then come up with an option that's good against that option. So I talked about that general concept, and I also gave you some examples, which are these three. What I'm going to do in this video is give you some more examples of ideas for that sort of mechanic that I would like to use, and then talk about what my intended next step is. So I'll just read all these. Speed is raised by strength and lowered by size. Lower speed characters must save versus constitution to avoid being tired out at half time. So that's fairly straightforward. I mentioned up here that players with high size are less good against people that aren't intimidated, because the players with the high size will have lower speed, and I've just used that idea. If you've got a high strength, that increases your speed, but if you've got a high size, that lowers your speed. I don't know how realistic that is. You could argue that, I think it depends on the scale that we're talking about. I think, and it also partly depends on what you think size means. Like, I think in real life, runners tend to be tall, but very skinny. So if you think of size as being bulk, like a person with higher size is wider, well then yeah, that does make sense. A person who is bigger and bulkier and looks more like a sumo wrestler, well, they are going to be slower. So I guess I'll go with that being the meaning of size. It's more like sort of width and bulk. Anyway, what I mean by save versus constitution is a mechanic that you often find in role-playing games, where you roll a die or several dice, or in the case of a computer game, simulate rolling those by generating random numbers. And if the total is higher than the attribute, in this case constitution, then that is a failure. And if it's equal to or lower, then it's a success, which obviously means that the higher the attribute, the more likely you are to pass. Next one. Donations to temples. Want to give as little as possible, but not the absolute least amount of any team, because we'll suffer disaster. So this is a fantasy theme. In a fantasy world, we can say, well, the gods are objectively real and sort of known to be real, and therefore every so often a temple will come around asking for donations from all the teams, and whoever gives the least, well, something bad will happen to them, which would make them wish that they had paid a little bit more so that they weren't the lowest. But of course, you also want to pay as low an amount as possible, because the less you pay, the more you get to keep, and you get to use gold for other things, money for other things, of course. So you have to predict what the other teams are likely to do, and then sort of base your donation on that. It doesn't have to be temples. That was just the first thing I thought of. It could be the Assassin's Guild, or you could say there's like a guild of hooligans or something like that, and they'll wreck your next match, whoever gets the least donation. But in fact, I quite like that guild of hooligans, so I might write that down. But yeah, whatever the fictional explanation is. The idea is everyone bids, and you want to be, ideally you want to be second last. So it's based on predicting what the other teams are going to do. All right. And finally, could have set bonuses for higher attributes that don't depend on how much higher. Thus, a high attribute is better than a moderate attribute, which is better than a low attribute, but a low attribute is better than a high attribute because savings for lower attribute are worth more than the bonus. So what does that mean? Well, let's say you get a set, the team with the higher strength. You can imagine this happening for any attribute, and I would probably use this for an attribute that I felt was underused. So if I had specific mechanics for strength and intelligence and willpower and agility, but not dexterity or something, I might apply it to dexterity. But the idea is if you've got two more dexterity than the opposing team, well, that's good. You get a bonus. If you've got 12 more dexterity, you get the same bonus. But the team with the lower dexterity, because their players have that lower attribute, those players are cheaper, and therefore the person controlling that team, or the computer algorithm controlling the team in this case, can spend that money on something else, and so it might be better to have a much lower attribute. Obviously, I have to make sure that the bonus for having the low attribute is truly worth it. Like, this is one of these ones that's not quite as easy to program, because the bonus isn't a set thing that's in a set point in the game. It's not like, well, you saved money on dexterity, so therefore you get 100 extra gold or something. It's more like, well, you saved money on dexterity, therefore you can buy more skills, you can upgrade your stadium, you can advertise more, and therefore get more fans. You can, do all these other things, and hopefully those other things do turn out to be worth more than having the high dexterity. It's easy to have it. It's easy to program it so that it's unbalanced and it doesn't have the consequence that you intended. And you have the dreaded single best strategy, which is the thing that we are talking about trying to avoid, of course. So those are some extra ideas. Oops, sorry, I wanted to just... There we go, that one. I have written this document, which you can get from the itch.io link in the description. I've also written another one which was about ideas for different attributes, but I haven't made any effort to sort of integrate the two, to make the two work together, and I'm not sure how well they will work together. So what I would like to do is spend at least one more video with design documents rather than start coding straight away. I would like to combine this document with the other one, which is the ideas for attributes, possibly eliminate some ideas, or at least put them to one side for now, possibly to be used later, and have a sort of unified single document that has an idea of how the game is going to work, or at least the sort of the minimum stuff that the game needs to work, and we can sort of add other ideas in later. So that's what I intend to do. My sort of instinct, or my preference, is just to kind of start coding and kind of just see where it goes. But I think in this particular case, because I'm trying to do a game that I haven't done before, and one which isn't a sort of terribly big genre, at least like fantasy themed management simulations aren't very common. I want to take a bit more time to plan things than I normally would, compared to if I was doing a dungeon crawl. I sort of know what to do, right? We can say, well, you need classes or some way of differentiating characters. You create a character or characters. You recruit people. We go into the dungeon. How do we generate the dungeon? Well, we sort of know how to do that, and so on. This is a bit more. There's a bit less of a precedent for it, at least that I know of. So that's what I intend to do. I may spend more than one video to come in design, but I want to spend at least one. But I will leave it there for now. I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.